Hello, and welcome to episode 24 of TBR, the To Be Read podcast, where we talk about the books we love and the topics that interest us. I'm Patrick Stemp, and with me, as always, are Michael Ronn and Jamie Maltman. How are you guys doing?
Great.
Awesome. So tonight we're going to be talking about authors who cross genres, and we're joined by Monica Leonelle. How are you, Monica?
Hey, I'm good.
Do you want to? Awesome. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
And so you are an author in your own right. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what you've been writing?
Sure. I have two pen names. One is my name, Monica Leonelle. The other one is Maddie Raven. And I have a number of books and series that are essentially started across all these different pen names, but they're pretty much all in different genres. Like I have a young adult urban fantasy. I have a young adult like sci-fi post-apocalyptic. I have under Maddie Raven. I have some like billionaire romance, and then some fairy tale, like not romance, like fantasy, and it's just kind of like a mix of everything. So definitely writing a lot across different genres.
Cool. And how do you spell Maddie? Is that M-A-D-D-Y or?
Yes. M-A-D-D-Y, and then Raven, R-A-V-E-N.
Awesome. So we're going to do a round table and talk about the reading we've been doing over the past week, and we're going to start with Jamie.
Awesome. Well, as I mentioned last week, I just kicked off reading Sawyer Jackson and the Shadow Strait by a friend of the show, Kevin Tumlinson, and really enjoyed that too. It was a similar vibe to the first book, to Sawyer Jackson and the Long Land, but did add some new characters and some new quirks, and we got to see the main character, Sawyer Jackson, who is a YA, like upper end of YA, sort of 16, 17 kind of protagonist. We got to see him growing some more, but also at the same time falling back a little bit because he's kind of a unique background that he's been with his grandmother, or his grandparents basically, for much of his life, and so he seems like he doesn't spend a lot of time with people his own age so much. From learning with them about all these different things he's been learning about. So it was neat seeing him put into a place where he's interacting with some people closer to his own age and seeing how that all developed. And I thought that it went pretty well, and so it was kind of a journey of a book for this next one, but sets up for probably an exciting next one that I don't know the name of yet. So I'll be interested to read it when I get there. And that pretty much took up my whole week in reading. I didn't get any nonfiction, but writing a lot, so that's the one book, and now I've got to look through my gigantic to-be-read pile and decide what I'm going to be reading next before bed tonight. So that's where I'm at.
Cool. How about you, Michael?
I actually got a lot of reading done this week. I kind of surprised myself compared to these last few weeks, but I finished book one of Sawyer Jackson, so you guys have talked about that enough. I don't have to go into that anymore, but I finished it and loved it, thought it was great, and I'll be getting to book two here pretty soon. I also read the advanced copy of Audiobooks for Indies by Simon Whistler. I'm sure you guys know Simon. He runs the Rock and Self-Publishing podcast, and read that, and it's basically like a manual or a guidebook for indies on how to leverage audiobooks and how to make them, and things to consider when you're in the ACX process. So that was great. I learned quite a bit from it, so that was good. And then I also I'm also reading right now the Self-Publisher's Legal Handbook by Helen Sedgwick. Have any of you guys heard of that?
Heard of it. I haven't read it.
She was
I haven't read it yet. Same thing.
Yeah.
On my e-reader.
Yeah. It's interesting. It definitely brings up some legal stuff that I never really considered running self-publishing as a business. So I don't know. We'll see how much of that actually I need, but it's definitely been an interesting read so far. And I'm also reading now book one of Ted Saves the World, the Ted Saves the World series by Brian Cohen.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm only like a couple of chapters into it, but it's pretty fun so far.
Good stuff. That's his debut book. So I've been hearing him talk about it on his podcast, and it's one I want to check out at some point. But yeah, good stuff.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, Brian Cohen of the Sell More Books show. I should clarify that. For those people listening who don't know who he is, but
and that's
that's his
call, right?
Debut fiction. Yeah,
Debut
debut
call
fiction.
and maybe fiction book. So yeah, it's good stuff. What about you, Patrick?
Good. Yeah, we'll jump ahead to me. I also read Sawyer Jackson and the Shadow Strait. Finished it yesterday. I enjoyed it a great deal. I definitely recommend the series to, as you said, Jamie. It's kind of upper end of YA, and I loved the characters in the first book. Graham and Gramps and Sawyer, and this book and 8 Ball. I love 8 Ball.
Yeah.
And this book just keeps adding like new characters. Is it Senna, I think? Tuck, Book, Teeter. Like there's all these new characters that are a lot of fun. It's just so I'll be really curious to see how it goes into the next book. I don't know if it's going to be a trilogy or if there's going to be.
I think he's got more than 3 books in that particular set, but that might be sort of extended. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it seems like it could be. This is a world that he could write in this world for the rest of his life. I mean,
it's a multiverse or an omniverse.
Yeah,
multiple omniverses, and so yeah, it's cool.
Absolutely, it's the kind of thing that I hope he keeps writing in this world. There's a lot that he could do with it, and it's the kind of thing that he could, if it ever took off, he could open that up to Kindle Worlds and let other people kind of play in his sandbox if he wanted to. So I definitely highly recommend the series so far.
And across genres too. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because there's, as you said, there's this sort of omniverse, and so there's some universes that are technology-based, and then there's others that are kind of backwards and still maybe haven't quite come that far. We haven't seen a whole lot of the worlds, but they're out there. So it's good. Monica, how about you?
Well, right now I'm reading this. It's a young adult urban fantasy called City of Heavenly Fire, and it's the 6th book in a series. It's by Cassandra Clare. You might have heard of her. I'm not sure. The first book in the series was made into a movie in the last couple years or so you might have heard of it there. And the series is interesting because I've been following it since it first came out, pretty much. But that was like 2007. So this is 7 or 8 years in the making, where we're finally. The 6th book is kind of like the last one in the series, and I'm at about 40% just because it's a really long book, and I just haven't had like a ton of time to get into it. But it's really good so far, and the whole entire series is really good if you like young adult. I would say the first 3 is like, it's a trilogy unto itself, and I would say I probably like those more, to be honest. Then and what she ended up doing is she wrote this second trilogy to follow the events in the first trilogy, and it's kind of like a good marketing thing, but I can't say that like I love the second trilogy as much as the first. So we'll kind of see how it goes. Hopefully by the end of this book, it'll be like a huge payoff, and it'll be like, oh good, I'm so glad she wrote the second trilogy.
I thought the second trilogy was a prequel, not like.
Yeah, she wrote. Well, she did do a prequel series, but that was, and it was also a trilogy, but that was more of like a historic fantasy. I read that one and I love that one.
So there's like 9 books in that series?
Wow.
It's almost like she just keeps writing in the Shadowhunter world, essentially. So yeah, it's like there's different trilogies at like different points in the world and with different characters. So, but the Mortal Instruments, which is like the first one, that one's a 6-book series, but it's described as like 2 trilogies back to back with the same characters essentially.
Okay.
How does it compare to the? Because I happen to have seen the movie, but how does?
Yeah.
Did you see the movie? How did it compare to?
I did not love. I hated the movie. I hated the movie.
I found there was some good. Yeah, I found like there's some good stories in there. Like there's a good story there, but it just seemed fairly lamishly done. And that girl was like a spitting image of what is it? That one of those vampire shows that my sister used to watch. But she
like
looks
Vampire Diaries or something.
That one, she looks like the sister of that one. So anyway, I just.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's an interesting thing as well, because the books are like. I mean, these are like 150,000 word books, and they're trying to turn them into, or even like 200. Like this last book was like 250,000. So these are really long books, and they're trying to turn them into 2-hour movies, and it doesn't work. So the interesting thing about that is that it was a movie. The movie essentially flopped, even though it has like a crazy fan base. But now it's going to be turned into a television show. And there's not a lot of details about that yet, but I think it'll do really well as a TV series because it's got like werewolves, vampires, everything. It has lots of international love, and it is a really great story. I just think that the movie format just didn't quite work.
That's like the Hunger Games. I loved the books. I can't watch the movies.
Yeah,
for me, yeah.
I like
considerably better than the first book of that Cassandra Clare series. So.
Yeah, the City of Bones movie was pretty rough. The Hunger Games movies I like a lot actually, but I love the books more for sure. What was that, Jamie?
No, I said I like the movies. Okay,
Jamie, we didn't.
Patrick's just picky, so.
Oh.
Cool.
So we'll move into our topic, and we're going to talk about authors who cross genres. Who wants to go first? Monica, you cross genres.
I do. I mean, yeah, I don't know. So I don't know what are we just talking about what we think of authors who cross genres?
Well, how about this? How about give your answer of why you cross genres or why you chose to do it, especially, earlier in your career rather than like one thing all at once or for a while and then trying your hand at something, because you've pretty much from the get-go you were doing multiple genres.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, to be honest, and I don't know, like I would say that it's probably not a good idea, to be honest. The reason that I did it was a little bit more naivety and then also just organically. So I started out, I was just writing young adult fiction, and that was all under Monica Leonelle. It didn't really occur to me that, people who like urban fantasy wouldn't really like my cyberpunk series and vice versa, but that is, I mean, the crossover there is a lot smaller than like you would probably realize until you started seeing it. Like the better thing to do would be like what Cassandra Clare did, where she's got like her one world and she just keeps on writing trilogies in it. And that's what her audience wants. So then the crossover is like a lot higher there. So I didn't really realize that. And then for the pen name, that was just like, it was like by accident really. So the story with the pen name is that I was having trouble writing a next book in my series, like for the urban fantasy that I was writing under Monica Leonelle. And I decided to do like a writing exercise, which was just essentially just, write something completely different than what you're trying to write. And so that writing exercise, I was like, okay, I'm going to write in first person, which I never do, present tense, which I never do, and I'm going to write sex scenes, which I never do. And that's so then I ended up having this novella, and it was good. So it wasn't really in my genre or anything, but then I published it under the pen name. And unfortunately, it did a lot better than my regular, my regular stuff, just because it had like the steamy sex, like romance stuff in it. So I kind of just continued with that. So that's why there's different things. But then in the Maddie Raven pen name as well, I also wrote 2 different series that I thought would have a lot more crossover than they actually do. So it's all kind of been trial and error and probably stuff that's really obvious to other people, but I don't know. I have author ADD when it comes to the series.
Well, it's funny because it's one thing that I thought about with the topic was how much do people follow one author versus how much do they find that author's genre and read it. And I'm not talking just sort of in indie publishing, but I just mean in general. Like, I don't know, there's some pretty, more recent famous ones, like, lots of people have read Harry Potter, like an awful lot of people worldwide. Did everyone follow, what percentage of her adult readers followed to that stuff once it was outed that she had the pen name releasing other stuff? Like, you guys have read Harry Potter. Have you read her other books?
No.
Did you try them?
But
do you ever intend to?
I think she did two things, right? She first release a book under her own, or under J.K. Rowling, and I can't remember what that was called. It's on the tip of my tongue.
It was The Cuckoo's Calling.
Right.
It was some regular adult, adult contemporary fiction, right?
And then she did the whole pen name thing after that, right?
Which, she wrote a mystery, they're called like quiet mysteries, quiet British mystery under Robert something. I don't remember. I could be totally wrong about those details, but yeah, I haven't read either of those, and
nobody cared until her lawyer's office accidentally, or a spouse of somebody at the office.
Someone leaked.
I think you have to put "leaked" in quotes because I don't know. For the courts to decide, I guess. What about? I had a couple others. Mark Twain was one that came to mind, which I think. Yeah. And I've read some Mark Twain, and actually the science fiction I actually haven't read, the Connecticut Yankee and King Arthur's Court. That's one that I haven't read, but have on my list.
Yeah, I mean, some of the other ones, like The Hunger Games, which we were just talking about, for example. I mean, Suzanne Collins, she has a middle grade series that is 5 books. That, I mean, I love The Hunger Games, but I haven't touched that at all.
A lot of authors seem to do that now. Like I was going to mention Carl Hiaasen, who writes a lot of like Florida crime novels, lots of crazy characters and stuff like that. And he's also written a couple children's books. I don't really know what age they would fall in, but Hoot is one of them. That probably the biggest one that you would have heard of. And then I'm just the author's name is escaping me now. The author that writes about 800 books a year, co-authored with
James Patterson.
James Patterson. Doesn't he have
some YA books out recently?
He has a lot of YA books.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that seems to be a genre, or that's
like a honeypot.
Maybe easier. Well, yeah. I mean, it's probably easier to write maybe for different age groups than it is to write for. I'm going to write horror, and I'm hoping that my horror fans will follow me to my science fiction. So maybe that's why they do that too, because it's kind of an easier split to make.
I wonder if in some cases it's actually, hey, I know the parents read me, and when they see that I write this YA thing, they're going to say, hey, you should check this out because I love James Patterson. Oh, here's this book for Christmas. And if it's any good, then they might get somewhere with it. I've even seen even further down because my kids are 3 and 5, and just at the library today we picked up a couple of Margaret Atwood books. And I've read some before that are in the kids section, like for 5-7-year-olds. We've got, as well as she's another one that crosses over from like obviously literary fiction to some of her sci-fi stuff that literary fiction people don't like it to be considered sci-fi necessarily, thinking it might taint it or something. I don't know. I've heard some of that at times.
You probably want to be careful though, because if you're a fan of Anne Rice and her vampire novels, you probably don't want to get your kids her Snow White book. And,
it's Sleeping Beauty. A.N. Yeah, it's like a really, really raunchy erotica trilogy.
That's how she started, right? Before she wrote.
I think she wrote it after the vampire ones.
Did she?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
And Exit to Eden was another one.
Oh yeah.
So she kind of bounced around a little bit too.
Yeah.
I was going to say another one who I found in the kids section that I actually had read first in the kids section was Neil Gaiman, whose name he pops up everywhere, but he's got some really, really cool kids books. And one was actually I just saw on the Goodreads top children's. I think it was one of the 2 children's books that I had read on their Goodreads 2014 Best of the Year. So it was like Chew's Tale or something like that. It was like a talking panda that was doing. I think that was that one. It was like Buddhist stuff, but it was pretty cool.
And he wrote Coraline, right?
He wrote Coraline, which again,
the Graveyard Book.
YA. The Graveyard Book is sort of YA-ish, and then Sandman being in graphic novels, and then he writes his sort of contemporary, slightly eerie fantasy stuff, and so he's someone who's wherever he goes, he's got the name and he's got sort of a versatile personality that people do follow.
Right. I think he's a special case though, because he's
awesome.
he's like, yeah, he's almost like genre agnostic though. Like he doesn't do any genre, you know.
I was gonna say he kind of does in a sense that like so while he might be writing for the different age groups and it is kind of I don't know what you would call it, but the spooky, supernatural kind of like Coraline's really weird and kind of fantasy and magic and in a roundabout way, it's all kind of maybe falls under the same big umbrella.
Except for is it Stardust, which is pure sort of fairy tale fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
And was made into a
there are
movie.
some creepy. I feel like there are some creepy parts in it though.
Okay, I haven't read the book, but I got the.
Yeah, I only saw the movie, so.
Yeah, the movie was it creepy?
Did you finish The Ocean?
Well, I get creeped out easily, so I hate horror stuff. So.
You want more? He gets more creepy in some of his short stories. In that was it Fragile Things short story anthology. He's got a few that were like, because I'm not so much into the creepy stuff either. But
Didn't you just read The Ocean at the End of the Lane, or you started it?
No, I want to. It's somewhere on my list of.
I
books.
thought you had started it.
And he wrote a pretty good episode of Doctor Who in the Matt Smith era as well. So he's all over the place, and all the Doctor Who fans are clamoring for him to write more. But
and I noticed, I think I've seen, I don't know if he's actually doing it, but I know Hugh Howey a while ago, maybe he was joking, was talking about writing a romance. So Hugh Howey's someone who normally, of course, writes science fiction. He's got iZombie. He moves around a little bit, science fiction, horror.
And his kid's book came out this week.
Yeah.
His first kid's book.
Misty the Proud Cloud.
Misty the Proud
Right.
Cloud. There you go. Yeah.
There's that kids thing again.
Yeah.
Kids, so maybe kids fiction, and then of course the other obvious, maybe low-hanging fruit for these guys is the nonfiction.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Stephen King's done it. Orson Scott Card has done. I mean, they've all written a how-to book at some point, which is good because these days when I'm looking at these how-to books for the craft, one of the first things I check is to see if they've actually written any. Here's how to write a bestseller. I've never done it myself, but I'm going to tell you.
Well, okay. So one interesting case that is not kind of the crossover between ages is Nora Roberts, who's like a really famous romance writer. She also writes something else under another pen name called I think it's J.D. Robb.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know if it's mystery or like thriller or what it is. But I mean, she essentially has like two really best-selling pen names, which I know part of it's like a legacy of the the traditional publishing regime where you couldn't she couldn't write a Nora Roberts thriller, for example, or
Wasn't
whatever.
it also that the genre she was writing in for the J.D. Robb books was mystery or something like that, and it's a genre that they wanted her to have like a
masculine.
Yeah, a masculine name because again, it's legacy, right? So I seem to recall it was something like they figured that a guy could sell more books than a woman.
Yep.
Which we know that's not true now because all these articles that are coming out about women dominating self-publishing. I don't know if you guys have seen that, but things are changing.
Is that because of the romance, or?
I don't know. All the articles I've read have talked about like the 50 Shades of Grey effect, but I don't necessarily know if it's 50 Shades. But I just think it's people being empowered to publish.
Because the article did talk about the generally still especially the higher levels male-dominated publishing industry, and how in some cases it was easier to there's lots of bestsellers, but there's a lot of mid-list. Maybe it was harder, and women that are just rediscovering it and going after it now.
It may also have been the whole if you've got an author like that who's writing more than you can publish under that name, because you don't want to put 3 Nora Roberts books out in a year. The publisher might say, if you put it under a different name, we can put 2 books out at once, and it doesn't look like we're creating a slush pile of your books in the bookstore.
Right.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's interesting. It like the whole pen name thing, like authors using pen names, because it used to be that, like with Nora Roberts and J.D. Robb thing. I mean, it seemed like she didn't really reveal that at first. Like a lot of authors write under pen names and don't tell you about it, because they don't want to be stigmatized or they don't want to take sales away. But now it seems like if you write under a pen name, you just tell everyone, like, yeah, I'm Michael Ronn, and I also write under B.B. McClatchy. I don't know. I mean, it's just kind of one of those things. So I wonder if that's going to go away, in the future, if it'll be an accepted thing not to have a pen name anymore. Because for me personally, when I'm reading books, I kind of get confused. Like, I would just rather know who the author is, It's like, I read a book and it's by some guy and, it ended up being Ray Bradbury or someone like that. I would just rather know it's Ray Bradbury, personally. Instead of having to go to the website, look it up, and then there not be a website, and then find out that it's just a shelf or somebody else that's writing all kinds of really best-selling fiction. I don't know. I'm kind of a non-traditional guy in that sense, but
well, there's also authors who write. There's like James S.A. Corey, who is actually is writing under one pen name.
Yeah,
and they're two, I think, fairly successful sort of individual fantasy authors, I believe, who are both writing in the science fiction world, and it's fantastic writing.
like Lex Thomas.
They did that series.
Quarantine, where Lex Thomas is two guys. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's just I guess I get confused, and I would just rather know, I guess would rather know who's actually writing the book.
Well, that brings the whole ghostwriter thing up too, right? It's not just like hidden pen names, but I was listening to Dean Wesley Smith talk about all of the things he's done, and he's ghostwritten. He recently said on, I think, Simon Whistler's podcast that he has a book coming out this fall, so it's probably out now, by a name that everybody knows, but he can't say who it is, of course. And he wrote the book. And it's weird. That kind of makes you wonder: am I really reading, the Stephen King, or am I reading Stephen King, in the voice of Dean Wesley Smith in Stephen King's voice, or whatever?
You just dropped the bomb there. Dean Wesley Smith is right.
Stephen King. That's why he's making all this money, hand over fist. Nobody knows who he is.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, I've ghostwritten, not books, but I've ghostwritten a lot of blog articles and content for like all sorts of people, like CEOs of big companies, all sorts of stuff. So I mean, it's happening a lot. Like it happens a lot in I think all industries that have writing now. So
yeah, I saw something today. It was like a landing page for some service. It's called like Kindle Champion. You guys heard of that?
No.
Mm-mm.
It's like I don't know what it is. It's one of those internet marketing things, but I thought it was interesting because it's like you can publish a book for $20 and something about it's some technique or secret to use the power of other people to publish your book quickly. I don't know. It's kind of weird, but
AKA them writing it.
Yeah,
it's just like,
exactly.
a secret. I got someone else to write this book.
See, that's maybe what you need to do if you want to sell more books, is to just
have other people write it. Yeah.
quietly suggest that it's actually Stephen King that wrote your book.
Yeah.
Don't throw, Michael Ron's next book, and
You can link it.
I could put up with that with nonfiction. Like if it came out today or tomorrow that Malcolm Gladwell didn't write his books, that it was some guy that was sitting behind him that wrote the books, I could live with that. But I don't think I could live with Stephen King coming out and saying, "Oh yeah, I didn't write Carrie. I didn't write Cujo. It was it was some guy that I paid off the street, that does it." I don't know. I just think that's a less accepted thing with fiction. I don't know what you guys think, but
I've seen. It's funny. I was just thinking of another one where or another area that I found some, because we talk a lot about sort of sci-fi fantasy and some of these other ones. Sorry, I kind of cut you off on your point there, or didn't answer your point, but historical fiction versus other stuff is one where I've seen some neat crossovers between some some people that are very famous for like Neil Stephenson, really famous for his cyberpunk stuff, but then he writes really detailed historical fiction multi-timeline stuff like the Cryptonomicon series or the Broke Cycle and stuff like that. That's fantastic on the one side. I've even seen some recent fantasy guys. There's a David Anthony Durham writes. Actually, his first book was something about, I think it was like in the South. It was like a historical fiction somewhere in the southern United States. But then he wrote, I can't remember which came next. There's Acacia, which is like a Game of Thrones-ish kind of epic fantasy saga that I really quite liked. And then he wrote a very, very good, detailed, tons of point of view historical fiction of Carthage and Hannibal versus Rome, and it was fantastic and again extremely detailed on that side. So it's I think that's a neat one where if you can do that epic detailed history, and then you can also do that epic, the epic fantasy world type one at the same time. That can be a sort of a neat crossover point within within two different genres that might actually get your people crossing over. Because there are people like me that do very much like both. Then there's the purists and I think the fantasy readers are more likely to do that, whereas trying to get historical fiction readers I want this to be real history to cross over to fantasy, even alternate history fantasy stuff can, I've seen some Goodreads groups that are, do not even mention magic in this historical fiction, I can go somewhere else. This is not here. This is ancient and medieval historical fiction only.
You see some authors, too, I think, who cut their teeth on one thing and then, for whatever reason, move into another. So, I mean, Elmore Leonard, cut his teeth on the Westerns and then obviously moved on to, like, the crime, the crazy stuff he ended up writing. And then, I don't know if George R.R. Martin, I know he wrote some science fiction, back in the, I think, 80s and 90s.
70s.
Yeah, and it's good stuff. I really like the Tough Voyaging is the series. And so I don't know if he was also writing fantasy at the time or if he kind of started with the science fiction and then crossed over permanently because he just, for whatever reason.
We have some comments, guys.
Okay.
Actually, I've got quite a few, actually.
Oh.
Amy Schubert's watching. She says, I'm totally the type to follow a writer no matter what they write. It doesn't always work out, but I love J.K. Rowling's mystery detective novels.
Awesome.
And Buddy Gott's watching. Yep, Buddy Gott's watching. Says, first time I've been able to watch live in months. Monica is super cool. Happy to see her on here.
Hi.
David Anthony is watching as well. So, hey, David.
David?
I was going to say to Amy's point, and actually to any of you guys, any of the people that are watching, but also maybe to you guys, have you ever done that where you tried to follow an author that you liked and that book just didn't work out, or it just ended up horrible? I was a little bit worried with one author, fantasy author I really like, Canadian, actually from your neck of the woods there, Patrick, our Scott Backer. Mm-hmm. And he wrote a very, very cool, it's actually one of the few series where I'm anxiously waiting for the third book of the second series to come out, and it's taking extra long, and now they're going to see, maybe they might split it into 2 volumes, or there's some of that happening with his publisher. So that would not be cool. Just make the huge one. But he wrote something completely different under Scott Backer. Two books. One was a very strange he's like a private investigator, and he was investigating this cult, and there's a whole bunch of really weird stuff, but the guy has a memory that basically every single conversation he's ever been in, he remembers everything. So the guy can't have a relationship and his present day stuff, because he's like, every argument he's ever had with a particular girlfriend, he remembers every detail of it again, and it just drives him nuts if she starts to go off on something, or if he knows where conversations are going to go based on this thing. He's just kind of crazy, but it was a really, really interesting, quite different one. I did quite enjoy it, and it was first person. It was so different. Like first person, he's kind of snarky narrator, so something totally different. I wasn't sure I'd like it, tried it, and I was okay with it. Another one he wrote, kind of psychological thriller, but it's like he's big time into neuroscience, so. It's called Neuropath, and it's very, very weird. Neither of those books did very well. So obviously, not a lot of people followed him, and it was kind of strange, the stuff he did. But he did just well enough that, like you were saying, he was able to launch to try something different. So I don't know. Have you guys had any like those?
Off the top of my head, I can't think of a good example. No.
Yeah, I've noticed it quite a bit when I read a lot of poetry, so like I'll read a lot of like classical authors who kind of wrote everything. A good example to me is like G.K. Chesterton. You guys have read anything by him?
No.
He wrote fiction, nonfiction, everything just about, and he's more famous for his essays. He wrote these really great essays where he would reason out things and talk about issues of the times, and just beautifully written. His novels, not so much. I think he wrote a book called The Man Who Was Thursday, and he wrote a couple of other detective novels that were okay, and then his poetry just sucked. You know, and it's like you read. When you follow him across a genre leap that big, it kind of doesn't work out as well sometimes. But same thing with Ray Bradbury. His novels are really good, but his nonfiction leaves a lot to be desired writing-wise.
Do we have any more? You said there were some more comments, or?
Nope. I think I'll just refresh one more time.
While Michael's checking that, I will thank Monica for coming on tonight. We appreciate you joining us for this conversation. It's great having you here.
Thanks for having me. It was really fun.
Where's the best place for people to find you online?
Well, I guess I would say you can find me at monicaleonelle.com. That has it basically is just a fiction website, and it does a lot of my young adult content. And you should be able to also find a link from there to my other website, which is prosonfire.com. And that website it's really just about things that I'm learning. So if you're more of an author, you could check that out. Or if you're into vlogging or any of that stuff, I kind of write about my mishaps over there. So that's also
so MonicaLeonelle.com?
MonicaLeonelle.com.
And that's Leonelle for anyone who's listening.
And if you'd want to check out what she's doing in the engine world, you can check out her story is also in Beyond the Gate. You're second up in the final version, right? I think it was.
Yes. Yeah, my story in Beyond the Gate is called The Crown Reading, and it's basically young adult, but it seemed like a lot of people, a lot of the readers who don't necessarily read young adult seem to enjoy it as well. So if you don't read young adult, you could still probably read it and enjoy it. But yeah, it's called The Crown Reading.
Yeah.
And is the best place to find that on the Blunderbuss World site or
Beyond?
Yes. So I posted I have a blog post, I guess. I don't think I have it on my website yet. I was gonna do NaNoWriMo for the next Engine World book, and I wrote like 1,500 words so far. So I'm like, there's no way I'm gonna finish that. But the reason I'm saying that is because the information is actually at monicaleonelle.com/NaNoWriMo.
Oh, okay.
I'm not going to complete NaNoWriMo this year. So, but if you want to read about the story, then you can go there, and it's a great call to action.
We were excited to work with Monica too in the anthology because she is one of the writers who is going to be continuing to write in the Engine world with her, with the spin-off from that story. So that's why it's exciting, and that'll be sometime in 2015, right? Early 2015.
Yeah. Hopefully the book will be done a little bit earlier than that, hopefully by January or so. But the actual book is going to be published in Oh, sorry, my dog is going crazy. I need you guys to see her. It's going to be published, I think, in March or April. There's a canon bundle that'll come out, and I think it's going to be free. So that'll be really cool. You'll kind of get to see all the different worlds and all the different blunderby, I guess, or engines, I should say. I don't think they're calling it blunderby, but that's what we called it at the World Building Summit.
Blunderby sounds right. Yeah. Octopus, octopi, yeah, that makes sense.
They're gonna be so irritated with me for calling it that.
You need to copyright that.
I do not want that to catch on.
Trademark it or copyright, one or the other. Okay, well, thanks again for coming on tonight, Monica.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me.
And thanks to our viewers and listeners on TBR. We record live on YouTube Tuesdays at 9 p.m. Eastern. We'll be back next week. And if you have a moment, if you enjoy the show, please rate and review on iTunes, and we will talk to you soon. Have a good night.
Take care.
Happy reading.